Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversations with Khofane. I'm Khofane Medise, and we are continuing the leadership series with Botswana Inusrance Company, and I'm joined by the CEO, NJ, if you're fondly known as NJ, or you could call him Mr. Newton Jazire. Hi, Newton.
I'm great. How are you this morning?
I'm fantastic.
Great.
How's your week been?
Oh, hectic, but that's part of leadership.
That's part of leadership.
Yes,
And speaking of leadership, today we'll be talking about leadership, or rather African leadership. And when you look at your experience, how would you define leadership in the African context?
Well, there's a bit of the feelings part when you're talking about African leadership.
Yeah.
It's about the community. It's about empathizing with the people. It's about being inclusive in your approach to things. It's about really, empathizing with the people and their situations. It's more driven by community needs rather than individuals. As Africa, there are some colonial legacies that we have because of what has happened to Africa in terms of the colonial era.
Yeah.
And that has left some sort of colonial legacies in terms of our leadership and how we view leadership. But this sort of in some cases, this is contrary to what our communities believe in, our cultures, our social fabric, how we look at things and how we do our things. So you really need to look at these things when you're leading in Africa. So it's about inspiring. It's about making sure that you encourage people and leading by example. They want to see you participating in what you're talking about.
True.
And the encouragement that you give them in whatever you're doing.
Yeah, earlier in one of our episodes, you mentioned ethnicities within Africa and different countries within Africa, how in Botswana it's different from Uganda. And so that kind of influences your leadership style. Is that something that you consider based on wherever you are in Africa?
Absolutely. And one of the major sources of failure is really this thing called cultural myopia, where you carry your own culture to another culture and try to impose it. We have seen a couple of businesses trying to expand into Africa from other regions, and they failed because of cultural differences. We have even seen businesses from South Africa trying to go north, and they failed because of cultural differences. So culture and Africa is rich in terms of ethnicity. It's really the mother of a lot of ethnic groups. So you need to incorporate or put into your understanding of leadership the different cultural values that are embedded in these ethnic groups that you need to really put on the table as you lead people in different territories.
Yeah, because here it's very family oriented. It's not people working in silos in comparison to the Western world. So, this might be a new concept for some people who are not really invested in leadership, where, for example, they've been trying to implement a westernized version of leadership. So can you maybe help us compare and contrast what a westernized leadership looks like in comparison to an African like?
Yes, so like I said, with African leadership, there's more community approach. It's more about community development. It's more about respecting the deep-seated cultural values and respect what is commonly known as Ubuntu across the whole of Africa. The moment you mention Ubuntu, almost everyone sort of resonates with what you're talking about. That's the humanness of a human being. But when you look at the other side, you're talking about the Western leadership. Western leadership is more about, individualistic approach. It's about what are our deliverables. Are you delivering? If you're not, that's it. And it's really, in Africa, we have this thing that if you want to go far, you need the team.
If you want to
go fast, you go alone.
Yes.
So really, that sort of sums up how we look at things in Africa, how we consider leadership and how to lead the people. So if you want to go really far, you need to move with your people. So you find that in Western cultures, it's about delivering. It's about, are you meeting your KPIs? It's not a family sort of like oriented setup. Here at BIC, for example, you find that we've become a family. We are together almost every day. We are together most of the time, more than home. So this has become more or less like a family. That's why if there are weddings, they become our wedding. In the Western culture, it's about family, and family members only attend these events. But here you find that it's a mega thing where everyone gets to participate because it becomes a family issue when one of us is celebrating life.
Yeah, and I'm appreciating that because I had a conversation with a particular leader, and they mentioned how they were looking at leaving their job, but then all of a sudden they had a funeral at their home, and then their boss came to pay their respects. And because of that one act, it made them want to stay because it showed that they cared. So I'm wondering, do you think that Westernized leadership can, or there are certain elements of Westernized leadership that can be adopted, or you don't think it would work locally?
I think there's some, in my view, there's some universal principles of leadership that apply in the Western world and also in the African setup. But obviously, there are some things like what you've just mentioned where they need to understand that for us, it's about this connection, this humanness that we want to see in your leadership. You need to connect with your people. It's about the community. It's about how people look at you. It's about the values you exude as an individual. This integrity, the moral integrity that we have, for you to pay respects to someone's parents for the last time as they buried them. That's you really showing connectedness, not aloofness in terms of leadership. But if you bring the individualistic approach from the Western sort of like culture or leadership, it might find you might struggle quite a bit in the African context because people want to see whether you empathize or whether you connect with their issues. Be it celebrating life or times of grieving, they still need to see that connectedness. And if it's not there, then people might feel like, why should I sacrifice my life and work for you? And the purpose, there has to be clarity of purpose. You know, people don't want to work for a hazy situation anymore, especially the young ones. They want clarity of purpose. Why do we exist? Why do we live as BIC? What is our purpose? So if there wasn't this motto of ours of making lives better, then you'd struggle to answer some of the youngsters when they ask, why do we exist? Do we just exist to sell insurance, or what does insurance do to people's lives? That is their focus.
You reminded me of a quote from one of John C. Maxwell's books. He says that you need to touch a heart before you ask for a hand.
Correct, and that's absolutely correct.
Yeah.
So it's the whole person. It's really the mind, the heart, and their soul. For you to be able to connect with someone, you need to consider all these three factors. Otherwise, then you're on your own, and you can't lead yourself. For a leader to be a leader, you need to lead people, to influence them.
Absolutely. And influence them, which is another part. So when you assess the unique challenges and opportunities that come with African leaders or the African leadership style in a global landscape, what are they when you think it through?
I think the the biggest challenge we face as African leaders really is that, or African leadership in general, is that there's too much economic inequalities that you see across different groups. There's a lot of at the same time it's rich to have various ethnic groups, but there's a lot of differences that exist, and certain sort of like beliefs and deep-seated cultures that are difficult to to eliminate. For example, if you look at Botswana government, the popular case of the people wanting to stay in the bush and and the government wanting to provide them with water and better facilities, but because they are so into what they're doing and they believe in the in the environment that they're living in and they see nothing wrong about it. It's quite difficult for them, the government, to try and make sure that there's equality, people get the same stuff, clean water, clean health. But at the same time, I think on the other side, we are rich as Africa in terms of the resources that we have, the youthfulness of our population. If you look at Europe, countries like Italy, you'll find that they're suffering. In Japan, they're already suffering from very old population.
Oh, wow.
And the workforce, even in Canada, that's why now they're beginning to, give people visas to come and work in Canada.
Yeah.
So so countries like Japan, they'll struggle a little bit because they're not as open to Africans coming to work in Japan, like Canada and other areas. But African leadership can actually exploit the youthfulness of our population, the resourcefulness of our Africa, and really take our position in the global development
Oh, yes.
to the level that we should be. So we can't keep on crying about colonial legacies and the history that we were colonized and were disadvantaged. I think we need now to come on the table and demonstrate the skills and the competences that we have to develop our own country, our own nation, continent.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then how do you think African leaders can balance the need to preserve culture and heritage while aiming for modernization and progression? Because, for example, maybe you have a staff that's full of maybe an older generation, and then you have a leader who's young and they don't know how to cope with that, or having a female leader, and then as a man, you're being told this is your leader.
It's it's a great challenge, I would say. But if you look at it, there's a good mix of the older and the young population in Africa. So what we need to do as African leaders is to make sure that there's education around cultural values and cultural practices, our traditions in terms of how we're living as a people. Let's make sure that people are not sold the story that the other westernized culture is better than our culture. And this is where I think we miss a lot in terms of who we are as a person, or who we are as a people in Africa, because we then tend to adopt certain westernized cultures that we don't even quite understand.
Exactly.
So in my view, it doesn't stop us from developing and adopting all these technological advancements, making sure that there's economic development and social sort of like, improvement for everyone, because we are maintaining and educating people about our culture. I think these can go hand in hand. You can actually maintain and teach people about your culture, but at the same time, look at how do we make sure that we provide clean water to the people, good education, good health, and all those other social things that you need to provide as a social good to the people as governments or leaders in Africa. So I think one doesn't exclude the other. They can actually develop together. We can adopt good things, technology, because we can't keep on saying we buy things by barter trade or exchanging goods, but we can adopt these improvements in lives, but in our life, but at the same time maintain the important part of our culture, the important part of our traditions. Let's not let them go because we think that the Western cultures are the best.
This question is coming from the perspective of emerging leaders. Is there a handbook that can explain all of this? Because most of the literature that's available or just well publicized is based on a westernized idea of leadership. So if someone doesn't have the experience you have, and you have a leader who has this book-based or textbook-based format of leadership, how can they go about it? Because I don't really know if there's much literature supporting African-based leadership.
Yeah, I think thank you for tickling my mind about thinking thinking about writing a book
Yeah.
myself, because I don't know of a lot of books that talk about these differences and how young leaders in Africa should look at it. A lot of us, it's now about the experience that we've sort of like practically got involved in these things. But by the time you're experienced, your years of corporate life is also getting limited.
Yeah.
So how much you can give back to the community, how much you can give back to other leaders is also a limited time. So I think there is need for there's a gap there where people need to write about leadership in Africa and how people can marry or work together with the values and leadership culture in the West and our own leadership style in
Yes.
Africa, understanding the community part, how the communities are interconnected, how you can't work and succeed without the people, how individualistic approaches are dangerous for your own as a leader, and how cultural myopia and not understanding that you can't carry on culture to other cultures is a big problem for your success. So I think it's a big challenge that we need to confront. Yes.
Well, I guess we'll be waiting for your book, if anything.
Thank you.
It's being documented
Thank you
now,
for
so you can't
inspiring me.
write from it. And speaking of merging both tradition and modernization, I know that you're into golf.
Yes.
And the beauty of it is that golf is often known, well, Western-wise, as a sport that's used for business people to connect. And then the beauty of that is that the connection part. And so how has that been a fundamental part for you in terms of networking, and even for your juniors, encouraging them to not just play golf for the sake of it, but to network and also have a healthy work-life balance?
The interesting thing is that I can actually point to some business that has come through to BIC
Wow.
through the golf connections. Some solicited, some just out of conversations, and someone says, no, but I want to do my insurance. So it's a good platform for creating relationships, and I always say that part of my job as the CEO is not to underwrite or pay claims, but my job is actually
Yes.
to develop this business development. You'll find that I'm closer more to the business development team in terms of my activities than any other team, because I believe that my job is to create relationships for BIC, to make sure that I get more stakeholders getting interested in what's happening at Botswana Insurance and why they should be involved more with Botswana Insurance, whether upselling or whatever it is. But golf is one of the key platforms that you can use to create new relationships, because sometimes in a four ball you probably be playing with three new faces that you don't know. By the time you finish walking 10 kilometers, surely you should have created some kind of relationship.
While having fun at the same time.
Also having fun at the same
Yeah.
time. So I don't buy into the thing that some people think that golf is a waste of time. I think they don't understand the business connection between golf and business. If you look at the old boys club, it's almost the same sort of like situation you're creating, because if you're going into this golf setup, a lot of them are decision makers, a lot of them are leaders in their businesses. So you're really talking to the people at the top to try and bring business to your business as well. Yeah.
It's actually very interesting how business deals are not just formed in the boardroom, but also during leisure time as well.
Lots of them are not in the boardroom.
Yeah.
Yes.
You see, that should also be in the handbook.
Yes.
I know a couple of young people who often have a stigma towards African leadership or African leadership style because of the association with maybe discrimination against various ethnicities or favoritism, or even just some level of incompetency. So what can you help us try to understand about the African style, or even appreciate about the African style of leadership? Because I'm seeing that our perspective was been, as young people, has been very flawed because of what we were seeing, maybe political leaders. And the assumption is that that is African leadership when it isn't.
Yeah. I think the African story is actually better as far as leadership is concerned.
Yeah.
My concern actually is that we do not sell ourselves as much as the Western world. Look at the likes of Nelson Mandela, the brilliance in terms of handling the apartheid issue and moving into the free South Africa, the reconciliation, the resilience when he was in prison and still urging people to fight for freedom for everyone. And then he comes out of that prison after suffering for so many years and still go for reconciliation. That
Yes.
to me is typical of the quality of leadership of African leaders, and that every African or upcoming young leader in Africa should actually look up to, because this is quality that we find in Africa that is being used across the world.
Yes.
The Mandela qualities are not just South African or African, they are across the world. People admire what he did, people admire what happened with Nelson Mandela. So I think it's just that we do not sell our stories as much as the Western world does. The Western world is more dominant as far as the media, the social media platforms are concerned. So they sort of like then influence our young leaders to think that this is where the best is emanating from. But discrimination is not a problem for Africa alone. It's a problem even in the Western world.
Yes.
So people need to understand that it's now about the personality of certain leaders. It's not something that you can generalize that if you're an African leader, you discriminate. If you're Western, you don't discriminate. I think there are good Western leaders, there are good African leaders that people need to pick and see who to follow.
Yeah.
It's not about following each and everyone.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look in the business space in Africa as well, the likes of Dangote from Nigeria, those are serious business individuals that show you the right acumen if you want to push your business across Africa and out of Africa if you wish to. Strive Masiwa, for example, from Zimbabwe, advising the likes of Barack Obama in the United States. That's not a small thing. These are big guys that are coming from Africa. So to think that Africa, because it's Africa, there's less leadership than Western. I think our young leaders will be lost. I think they need to appreciate that we have a lot
Absolutely.
that can come out of African leaders. We need to take our space on the table now and say, here we are as Africans, and we can deliver much better than some of the Western leaders that we see we've seen. Yeah. So I think, in a nutshell, I think that's what I think should be happening about upcoming young African leaders.
Yeah, I think you're also making me appreciate this platform as well. Like you said, we should sell our stories and make it public and make it known that African leadership is ideal and the core pillars it stands on as well.
Correct.
Yeah.
So it's we tend to have the West coming to tell us that they've discovered this or they've seen this in Africa when we've like long seen it. There are arguments, for example, to say Livingstone discovered Victoria Falls. You're saying Zambians and Zimbabweans were living across this river in Victoria Falls. So it's about selling the story. It's about how you sell yourself to the world, and this colonial thing that Africans don't think methodically, they don't think logically, they don't think with a bit of complexity, is what we need people to understand, that it's not like that. It's not that Africans do not have the capacity to think better than the Western leaders. So I think that's, in my view, is the challenge we have. And that's what we need to tackle.
I can tell the passion is stirring, and we can go on and on. We'll definitely need a part 2 for this. And thank you all for watching. We will continue this discussion on African leadership. Make sure to stay tuned and watch us next time. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.